Just to do one little add-on about B. Some of you know, some of you don't, but Baptist allows only one visitor at a time. So letting her know that you're thinking of her because she's there alone all day means the world to her. It's interesting because B and I had talked a lot about this as the last program under her year, because B's passion, of course, the things she loves most are Peter, her family, her extended family of Rotary Youth Exchange students, Hayanchi, and travel. And this 3 months has been hard on a lot of people for a lot of reasons. But for B, it was all this travel that she had planned. And so the idea of having really an up and exciting program on, okay, yeah, we know we haven't been able to travel, but what's looming in our future, and also having Rosemary talk to us about what good deals there are. So I'll be making notes for her to make sure she knows the good deals. Rosemary's bio was in the gear, and also a little bit about Avondale Travel, noted that was founded by a Rotarian. So I know there'll be a lot of questions for Rosemary, so I'm going to turn it over, and thank you for coming, Rosemary.
Well, thanks, Vicki Lynn, and thank you guys for inviting me today. It's kind of fun, the Zoom thing. This whole new way of life is definitely very interesting. So, and I think before I get started, you guys did a disco party probably about 15, 16 years ago at UNF. I don't know if anybody was there for that. I attended that with my husband and some of his folks from work. And that party was when I learned that my typically very quiet and not too crazy husband was actually willing to dress up if he thought there'd be a prize at the end of it. So I owe you guys thanks for that, because over the years I have capitalized on that one. So thank you. What I have today is I've got some slides, and they're just to keep you from looking at my face the whole time. But Vicki Lynn asked me to join you today and talk to you a little bit about travel, where we are now and where we're going. I thought it might be interesting to add just a little bit about how this whole thing unfolded. You said it's been 3 months. It's definitely not all gloom and doom. We have things that are picking back up. So we're excited to be here, and we are excited to look towards the future. I'm going to go ahead real quick and just share got a little PowerPoint. Let me get that started. All right, there we go. Can you guys see that okay? Okay. Back in mid-February, we started getting calls from clients, and they said, what's going on? What's this virus? What are we hearing? We've been monitoring the situation, but everything we had seen said it was very small and limited. We reached out to our travel partners around the world, and they said, no, it bears watching, but for now, things are not closed. Things are still open. Go ahead and book travel like you always do. A couple of weeks after that, we come into the office, and we have phone calls from all the local TV stations saying, hey, do you want to talk about coronavirus? Again, we reached out to our partners. They said, oh, it's a little bit bigger, but no, you can still travel. But at that point, they're saying, remind your clients, follow the public health guidelines, wash your hands. You guys know these. Cough into your arm, stay away from people who are sick. A couple weeks after that, our borders are closed to foreign nationals, and our business as we knew it came to a screeching halt. 5 weeks. It took 5 weeks for this to unfold. And here we are 3 months later, and we're just starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been in this business for 32 years, both on the agency side and on the supplier side. I started at the tail end of deregulation. We've lived through changing political climates, changing economic situations. Never have we seen this. Even September 11th, which was a huge, devastating event, travel shut down for 5 days. It was slow to come back, but it's still, the total shutdown was 5 days. So this was a complete change. Sorry, I didn't know if I had to let that person in. It was a complete change for us. We haven't seen anything like it before. On March 25th, we moved to our home offices. We closed our storefront in Avondale and went home in accordance with Mayor Curry's Safer at Home initiative. Around that time, I had a friend say to me, oh, you're going to have so much free time. What are you going to do when you're at home? Turns out that wasn't the case. I was so busy that first 4 weeks rescheduling, rebooking, reorganizing, And there were a couple of cancellations and refunds, but because we're not focusing on the doom and gloom, the cancellations were typically people who had medical reasons and it was iffy if they could travel at all. So it's been 5 weeks, or I'm sorry, 3 months, but things have started to pick up. Our corporate clients have started rebooking over the last week and a half. And I have a family of 4 who left for Alaska last Tuesday, and they are loving it because they've mostly got the state to themselves. So what does travel look like today? In a word, it's different. Safety and cleanliness, of course, are taking priority. Everybody's trying to figure out how to make sure that they're clean and they're not passing on any germs. The airlines are flying, and they have been all along, but with reduced capacity. There are fewer flights, and there are fewer passengers on those flights. Everybody's been trying to figure out how to make that social distancing guideline work for them, and the airlines are at the forefront of that because you figure they got an awful lot of people in that little bitty airplane. So they've really been trying to figure out how to make that work. Number one, masks are required. We've heard a couple of anecdotal stories from people, oh no, we didn't have to wear masks. Masks are required from gate to gate. So you have to have your mask on when you're in line to board, and you have to keep it on until you're back in the airport, unless of course you're eating or drinking. My clients who went to Alaska last week said they had to keep it on the same time, but otherwise it was the same. Another thing you'll find when you're traveling right now, no middle seats. And I love this. This is my favorite thing. They're not putting anybody in the middle seat. If you're traveling with family and friends and you want to sit together, you can and just request it and let them know. But nobody's going to put you in a middle seat unless you ask for it. And that's allowing extra space between travelers. Food and beverage, so your snack, you may find that you maybe have a choice of water or coffee on the plane, or you might get a little Ziploc bag with maybe some water and a couple of snacks in it and some wet wipes. And we also understand, and I heard you guys talk about the bourbon earlier, sadly right now, alcohol service has mostly been discontinued on aircraft. The ultimate goal is to minimize contact between the flight crews and the passengers. Aircraft are sanitized before each and every flight, and everybody has their policies online. So if you want to find out what's happening, say you're flying next week on United, just go to their website, click on their update, and they'll tell you everything they're doing to keep you safe. So that's the boring stuff. The good news is airplanes are still flying, and there are more and more being added every day. More flights are coming back every week. International flights are ramping back up, and we're expecting to see a fairly robust schedule by this fall. Now, you guys want to hear about great deals. Here's what I'll tell you. There are some amazing airfares out there right now, but you've got to be a little bit of a gambler in order to buy them. I have some clients who are scheduled to go on a honeymoon to Maui at the end of July. We've kind of waited and held back on it because we didn't know what's going to happen. Hawaii just extended their quarantine period through July 31st. But if you want to go to Hawaii in September, so I priced this out for the middle of September, Jacksonville to Maui typically runs about $1,200 per person. On September 15th, you can do round-trip economy airfare to Maui for $588 per person. So it's a great price. What you have to do, though, is be mindful that you've got to kind of find that balance between when to buy your ticket and when everything is going to be open again. I had another client call me. He said, my kids want to go to see a baseball game. We don't know when the season's going to start here. We're going to go to Japan. I found this great airfare from Orlando. It was Orlando to Tokyo for about $550. At least probably just under half of what we normally see. He said, what would you do? Well, we reached out to the Japan Tourist Board, and they were very nice, and they said, yes, that is an amazing airfare. However, Japan is not at this time welcoming visitors from the US. And when the baseball season starts this Friday on the 19th, it's going to be without fans in the stadium. So for now, he's going to wait, and we're just going to keep an eye on it, and maybe they'll go later in the summer. I guess the bottom line on airfares is, yes, there are some great deals out there. You've just got to make your mind up. You're going to either gamble, or you're going to go or not go. I think that once we see things start to stabilize and economies are opening up and things are opening back up, I think that airfares will probably start to stabilize where they've been over the past couple of years. Hotels, just like the airlines, are focusing on safety and cleanliness. We've reached out to many of our hotel partners within driving distance. Most of them are open, or they're going to be opening soon. South Florida is lagging a little bit behind because you guys remember they started their phase 1 after we did. But most everybody, if they're not open, they have their opening date on, I think most of them are open by September the 1st. Hotels, just like the airlines, are operating at reduced capacity. They're focusing on distance, so you'll leave distance between the passengers, and they're also leaving rooms open to allow for deep cleaning between guests. If you were to stay at a hotel right now, you'd probably find fewer guests and also fewer amenities and services. So the pools, the spas, the gyms, they'll be open and there'll be people there, but it's probably going to be about 50% of what you're used to seeing. You may also find that food and beverage options are limited. The good news is, even though food and beverage options are limited, you may not find as many things to do in the hotel themselves. Every hotel that we've spoken with maintains a list that they hand out at check-in, telling you, you can't eat here, but you can eat at all of these places. These activities are open nearby. So they want you to come back. They want you to have a good time. You may just have to step outside of the hotel to do that. And I know a lot of people, especially for small trips and local trips, like to do their own thing. For travel right now, we are really recommending everyone reach out and work with a travel professional, because we don't want you to get someplace and find that you can't get in, you can't get a reservation. Now, Vicki Lynn did mention that there are several experienced cruisers in the crowd. So this may be old news to you guys, but cruising is still a little bit up in the air. We've talked about this one in the office, and I think the consensus is once that first ship actually pushes back from the dock, we'll start to feel a little bit better about things. The Carnival ship that ports here in Jacksonville is scheduled to sail on September 5th, and most of the other cruises that leave, Caribbean cruises that leave from Jacksonville, are all scheduled to go pretty much between August 1st and September 5th or so. So it's just about a 30-day period. Policies are still being reviewed, and I think as we move forward over the next couple of weeks, we'll hear more. European river cruises, same timeline. We have AMA Waterways. They say they're starting on August 1st. I have people booked for the middle of August, and they are excited and ready to get the heck out of here. Viking Cruises says they are starting on September the 1st. One of the things I'm interested to hear about, and you guys mentioned this earlier when you talked about your luncheon at River City, is the buffet. Anybody who's been on an ocean cruise knows that buffets are a pretty big part of that cruise experience. I'm interested to see how they're going to manage that. And I think one of the things that we'll see is that there'll be somebody there to serve you rather than having everybody grab the utensils with their hands and spreading germs that way. I think though, as we move through the next couple of weeks, August 1st is only about 7 weeks away. So I think as we move closer, we'll hear more and more about what's going to happen with cruises. Everybody wants to know, what are the great deals on cruises? This one, I've got to say, we haven't seen any great deals. The prices have remained steady, so nothing's jumped up, but it's been pretty constant. The one thing to remember is the cruise lines they've been stuck. They haven't been moving for 3 months. They've got people who are already booked to travel when they start sailing. And we have all those people who had to have their cruise rescheduled, and they're also probably going to be operating at reduced capacity. So we are watching the cruise lines closely. As soon as we see deals, we're going to tell everybody about them. But for now, prices have remained pretty constant. One of the trends that we're seeing right now is domestic travel. People aren't comfortable flying. I talked to a client yesterday, and he said he is ready to get on an airplane and go, but his wife is not interested. I have the same problem in my house. My husband has told me he's not getting on an airplane anytime this year. I'd go tomorrow. I'm trying to figure out how hot I'm going to be with a mask the whole way because, it's hot to go to Publix. But I don't know what we're going to do. We have to go to a wedding in Texas in November, so we're working that one out. But it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you. We have a lot of great driving destinations near Jacksonville. So in a day's drive, you can be at a beach, you can go out to the Panhandle. Even the mountains up in North Georgia are only about a 7-hour drive. So there are a lot of different things to do that they're in a reasonable driving distance. Hotels are open, restaurants are open, but again, just remember that you need to make reservations. For anybody who's a little bit braver and you want to get on a plane, but maybe you don't want to cross the ocean, national parks. The U.S. national park, and everybody in the office makes fun of me because I talk about this all the time. We have some of the most amazing scenery in the world in our U.S. national parks. The Park Service is operating just like the states. They're opening on a phased approach. So things are open, but you may find that you have to have a specific reservation time. They may limit the number of guests. And you may find that services inside of the parks, you may not have a restaurant or place to go and eat while you're in there, but they are open. You can do the hiking trails and things like that. One of my favorite things to do when we go to a national park is, and we always do this, I don't know why, but we stop on the way in and find maybe a place that does a box lunch, or stop at the grocery and pack a picnic, take it in with you, find a nice place to sit and relax and enjoy the park. It's really a good idea to do that now, because that may be the only food you have to take with you and you might get hungry. Remember, sometimes they're a little bit remote. So grab a picnic lunch, sit down, relax, enjoy the scenery. For everybody who wants to do international travel, I'd probably wait just a little bit longer on this one. I have a couple that wants to travel in September to France, the very beginning of September, and they've got a very specific wish list. Western Europe is really just now starting their open, so I'd probably wait on that one. We're probably going to go ahead and reschedule that. But I have another couple booked for October to go to Italy, and we've got confirmed reservations on most of their activities. So as we move further into the fall, I think we'll find that more things are opening up. It's just a matter of being patient. The word that we have from all of our travel partners is, by festive season, we expect for everything to be open again. Asia Pacific, the Caribbean, South America, and Africa, same. They are starting to open back up slowly. We see dates over the next 3 or 4 weeks, actually, into July for a lot of the Caribbean. So it's just waiting for everything to open and be ready to welcome guests. And again, if you see a great airfare, I think about it. I definitely talk to somebody and see what does the picture look like. One of the things that Vicki Lynn asked me about was passports. So remember, if you're traveling internationally, a passport is required, and most countries require that passport is good for 6 months after you return. Airlines can deny boarding if your passport is not valid for that additional 6 months, and people say, oh no, they won't do it. We had a client this happened to, so I always like to remind people, make sure your passport is good for 6 weeks after, or 6 months after you return. If you need to renew your passport, though, right now, you're going to have to pack your patience. The U.S. Passport Service just opened their phase 1 last Thursday, June 11th. They have minimal staff in the office, and they are processing life and death rush passports only. So if you need to get to a family member in another country, they're operating on a first in, first out basis, and they have told us to expect significant delays. If you need to renew your passport right now, they're asking for you to just sit tight for a little bit longer. Once they move into phase 2 and phase 3, they'll add more staff and they'll start clearing that backlog. I rarely tell people this. I always tell them just use the passport service. But if you have to renew or get a new passport once phase 2 or phase 3 starts and it's a rush, I would use a passport service at that time, because they will walk that through and get it moving through quickly. So back on March 25th, I thought this whole thing would be over in about 6 weeks. And here we are 3 months later, still waiting for it to be completely over. The good news is that airports are coming back online. International flights are ramping back up. Hotels are opening, and tours and cruises should all be operating by this fall. Things are starting to look up, and for those of us who have cabin fever, and I know I can raise my hand, I'm ready to get the heck out of Dodge. my best advice is to start slowly. So do something close by, maybe with a car, maybe just hop a trip to Atlanta for the weekend. And then as we move later into the fall, then you can start to plan your bigger trips. That great big world is still out there waiting for us, and soon they really are going to be ready to welcome us back with open arms once they know that they can handle anything that might come up. Avondale Travel is ready and waiting to help you with your planning so that your next adventure can be easy and stress-free. So if you guys would like any more information or hotel information that's nearby or need help with your next vacation, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you. So I tried to do it as an overview, but I imagine you guys may have some questions.
So why don't we try, everyone, to, in a nice, calm manner, ask Rosemary your questions directly. And if that doesn't work, then I'll read them all on the chat screen.
I'll start with, oh, Vicky Lynn has got one. Sorry.
Go ahead, Governor Mike.
I've got a question. I had heard that Maui or Hawaii, that the folks around the hotel were actually reporting people if they did not do a 14-day quarantine in their hotel. Since we were planning to go to the Rotary Convention in Maui and we decided to go ahead and cancel, we're very glad we did. But have you heard anything like that?
Anecdotally, we'll hear things like that, but since none of our folks have been there, I think we hear it everywhere that people are reporting people. They just last week extended the quarantine through July 31st. When was the convention supposed to be?
It was supposed to be, what, last week?
Last
First
week.
week in June.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that would have been a non-starter. No, people are reporting people. You guys watch TV, I'm sure too, you see this. Everybody wants to be the reporter on the scene. So probably so, but no, I have not heard anything officially.
Vicky Lynn?
I have a question. So in talking about cancellations and waiving cancellations, can you talk to us, Rosemary, a little bit about the protection from canceled flights as opposed to, or in addition to, the insurance for flights?
So right now, the airlines, the US airlines, and we have to keep the US based airlines separate from the European carriers because they have their own set of rules. But the US based carriers right now have a pretty broad cancellation policy. If your flight is canceled, or if you have a schedule change of more than 90 minutes, you're able to request a refund for that flight. If the schedule change is less than 90 minutes, or you just don't feel comfortable flying, then you're able to get the value of that ticket as a future credit, and the airlines will not charge you, because typically they'll charge a $200 change fee. Right now there are no change fees, so if you just decide you don't want to go, you call, cancel your flight, you have that credit to use towards a future trip. You can do the same trip, or you can do anything else. It's just a dollar credit. Insurance is a whole other animal. The travel protection insurance that you can purchase it through the tour operator, or you can purchase a separate policy. They are not covering COVID-19. So I have some clients who purchased a trip back in the fall and they were supposed to travel this spring. One of the family members has an autoimmune disease. They purchased it at the right time. So you have to purchase, it's within 14 days of your initial deposit in order to cover any pre-existing conditions. Even with that, it was purchased in the right time frame. They are still having to provide additional documentation from the doctor that they couldn't travel. But anything like that, you just decide that you don't want to go, it is not a covered reason, and they are not covering those policies. If you purchased a cancel for any reason in policy way back before all of this started, whatever the coverage is, and I think in Florida it's 50%, you'll get 50% back. But just, I don't want to go, I'm not comfortable, the insurance companies are not covering that. And that is a very uncomfortable conversation that we've had far more times than we'd like to talk about. Does that answer it? Thank you. All right, I thought I saw one pop up on the screen.
Let me check that chat. Yeah, so I'm going to read you one from Bill Trayer. Bill said, Rosemary, we were scheduled for our interview for Global Entry last month, which got canceled. Do you think it's worth it when we can use the mobile passport app? Also, any ideas on when Canada might open back up for non-essential travel?
Oh, we love Canada right now. So Canada, I think the latest date we heard was July 31st. So they have canceled the entire cruise season. So we're not sure with Canada. Hopefully sooner rather than later. That one I can't answer. Global entry. Has anybody ever come through JFK on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the summer? I would get global entry. And actually, we came back from Scotland last September, and my husband looked at me and he said, you mean there's something we could have paid for so that we could cut to the front of this line? So yes, I still think it's worth it. I have to get mine actually.
Also, I had, oh, here we go. Sorry, that wasn't a question for you. Tom Signorella is leaving.
Bye.
Anyone else have any questions for Rosemary? Yeah, Jacob.
Oh, he's muted.
Unmute yourself.
You had a suggestion for us to book vacations, taking advantage of the prices now. What would you suggest?
It's kind of a gamble. It's hard to know. So I looked at the Maui tickets for mid-September. I probably would push it out maybe another 6 weeks, maybe late October. I think the thing that I would do is look where I want to go, compare what's open right now, and look where they are in their reopening process, and then maybe go about 4 to 6 weeks out from that. So it's kind of a math problem all at the same time. But you've got to just weigh out what you think it's going to look like versus that airfare. The fare to Maui is amazing. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be lonely because my husband says he's not going with me. So.
Yes, so can I just say I'm sick of hearing about all this Honolulu and Maui, Hawaii stuff since I had to forego all of that. Let's pick a new destination.
Well, you want to go to Tokyo and watch a ball game? Alaska's the one that's been driving us crazy. The cruise season, we waited and waited and waited, and it just was, once they finally canceled it, then it was nonstop, go, go, go to get everything rescheduled. But Canada's been a little challenging, but what are you going to do? Everybody gets to make their own decisions.
This is true. Vicki Lynn, did you have another question?
I did. In talking about Alaska, what about flying there, and how hard is it to get into Denali if we fly there?
So the flights are decreased. So there aren't as many flights. I have my clients who left last week were booked on United. United canceled their flight, so we rebooked them on American. From Jacksonville, they had to go from Jacksonville to Miami to Dallas and into Anchorage. So it's some of the flights are canceled. It makes it a little bit more challenging, but the airfares were good. Denali opens up on July 1st, the park service, and has anybody been there? They do the school buses into the park. They are opening back up on July 1st, so you'll be able to get in. My clients who are there right now were able to enter the lottery, and they actually have a ticket to drive 30 miles into the park by themselves. But no, the flights are there, availability is there in hotels, everything is opening back up again. One of the big, everybody knows, Alyeska Resort, which is just southeast of Anchorage, just opened up today. So things are opening back up.
Good. So I'm going to hit back on the group chat again. Crystal wanted to let us know that hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains is great at this time. Hotels and bed and breakfasts are open. You can eat outdoors at restaurants. It's just a few hours away.
Yep.
Good. Then Mike Dara also said, do you have any idea about the local hotel rooms? Will we have any trouble housing 30,000 people in the Jacksonville area? Are they using cruise ships? And of course, he's talking about the RNC.
The cruise ship. Well, the cruise ships, I don't know what we're going to do because that's still, I know that's, didn't we do that for the Super Bowl? Or
Yes,
try
we
to
did.
use the cruise ships for the Super Bowl? It's the same. I don't know. I honestly don't know because at the hotels, they're saying they're operating at 50 to 60%. The Ritz up at Amelia Island is running at 60% right now. So it's hard to know, but you've got to think that if we have the convention coming, that someone has thought through what we're going to do to house all of these people.
Bill, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah, can I ask Rosemary a question? I've been planning a trip across the northern United States, hitting Glacier National, Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, maybe a couple other parks. And so my wife is kind of like your husband. She's really nervous about flying. And so she just walked in the door. So I believe it's perfectly safe if everybody's wearing a mask. What I was curious about was, are the airlines, I know they mandate that you get on with a mask. I've read all that. I'm assuming that they're also doing temperature checks, although I don't know that for sure. But I know they're mandating a mask when you get on. Are they mandating that you keep it on to the extent where somebody says, I'm taking mine off? Some people think it's some kind of First Amendment right to not wear the mask, that they're landing the plane and throwing them off.
I don't know that they're landing the plane and throwing them off, but we just got an email this morning that one of the domestic airlines, if you refuse to wear your mask, they are putting you on a watch list. So they are taking it very seriously. We had somebody that told us last week, oh, I didn't wear my mask at all. But my clients who went to Alaska, and they're pretty, I know her, I've known her for a long time, but she said, no, my husband wanted to take his mask off and they told him to put it back on. Unless you're eating or drinking, you're required to wear the mask.
Okay. And you're comfortable that it's safe?
I think that's probably, I would go. I will say that, I would go. But I'm not a doctor. But I have a client who, he's a doctor and his wife is a nurse, and they rescheduled a trip. Their cruise got canceled. They rescheduled for next year, not because they were worried about traveling, but because they didn't want it to be canceled again. So I don't know, you guys, I am not a medical professional. All I do is the best that I can. But I have to wear a mask too.
This is Lee.
Okay.
I have some comments on Alaska.
Okay.
We went a couple of years ago, and I would think, it's fairly rugged and it's very rural, mostly once you leave Victoria and Seattle. And I would say that it is not a good time to go there.
Well, with Canada closed their ports through the summer. So the cruise season itself is canceled for this year. Nobody's operating Alaska cruises this year.
No, I know that, but the cruises only last about 3 days. It's
Right,
a
and
short cruise.
Then the rest. But the state of Alaska lifted their quarantine, their 14-day quarantine. They lifted it the first week. You have to have a form, or you have to bring a doctor's note with you saying that you've had a clean test within the last 72 hours, and they are checking people upon arrival. So I know it's hard. It's hard to know what to do.
I'm just recommending waiting on Alaska.
Okay.
Michelle, did you have a question?
I see Vicki Lynn's hand up again.
I was in the middle of typing up in the chat.
Go ahead, Michelle.
That's
I
okay.
could get it. So I had a trip to Iceland that was scheduled in mid-March. That was a dream trip, unfortunately canceled. Do you know anything as far as the updates on the situation in Iceland right now? in terms, because I had been reading positive things, but I wasn't sure what the situation was like to your knowledge.
They were supposed to open back up yesterday, the 15th. I actually have a note on my calendar. I haven't had a chance to do it. I have some folks who are waiting to see what the airfares look like. So there are flights, but they've been limited. So I'm going to actually work on that this week. But they're supposed to have opened back up yesterday. I would give it time because, yeah, I think it's just like us where we have that phased reopening and the first couple of things, but it's going to be limited. And especially for a dream trip to Iceland, I'd wait a little bit longer to make sure that you can get in everything that you want to do. And that's the thing. You don't want to just go to say you've been there. You want to actually go and have the experience.
And just as a follow-up to something you mentioned earlier, it was the first time in my life I bought travel insurance. That was all for naught. It took over 3 months to finally get refunded through Iceland Air and the hotels. It was a nightmare, to say the least, in terms of trying to get my money back on that trip.
Yeah, it's been crazy, so I get it completely.
Mike, did you have another question?
Yes, my wife is sitting next to us here listening in. That's her hand, you see. And so she said, you have to ask, are the schedules back like normal on the trains?
The Amtrak?
Yes.
And European trains.
Oh, and European, sorry.
European trains have been shut down for a while. I actually saw an email come in this morning from them. I haven't even read it yet. Amtrak, I just got stopped by the train yesterday on my way home from work over here on Roosevelt. So I don't know. I will check on that one. And then Vicki, Lynn, do you want to be my contact and I'll shoot the answer to you? I'll send that to you via email. So I'll check on that one for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any other questions for Rosemary? Oh, Becky Lynn.
I know. I'm one of the travel bug people. I've not been this long without travel in my adult life. We are looking at a Yosemite trip, and you mentioned buses, and I saw on the website that they just opened Yosemite, but they're not going to be offering the shuttles. Do you have any insight on that and how they're limiting travel in there?
Yosemite, I did not. That's one of the few I didn't look at the other day. But they'll have worked something out. I know, and just to use Denali as the example, they're not running their scheduled buses, but they were doing a lottery to let people into the park. But when were you planning to travel?
End of August, beginning of September.
I think by then things will have started to settle down and the things should be running again. But I can't say enough. Just remember, use your mask, wash your hands, and follow all the guidelines. And I think by then things will have started to settle down.
I have a question. I'm just curious. If I'm going to fly, which I'm not going to right now, but anyway, if I was going to fly and I had to wear a mask, I can get that. But once you let me take it off to eat or drink, what's the point of the mask?
Yeah, that's a very good. It's a good question.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not writing the policies. You have to get those masks with the little the caps where you can have the straw to eat. Have the little hole in it to eat.
It just makes me giggle to think about it. It's okay, as long as you're not, if you're eating or drinking.
Don't breathe. You can't eat while you're eating. You can't breathe while you're eating.
Whatever.
Deb,
I mean, they're doing the best they can. You got a lot of people in a little bitty space, so I think they're doing the best they can.
there's a real good article in the Wall Street Journal this morning. We are pulling together the research and how long the exposure can be or needs to be before you're really, really exposed and have a high likelihood. So I'm not a doctor, but I thought the research that they quoted was very helpful.
That was in today's. We'll see that. We'll get it here in the office in a day or two.
And they also mentioned about the airlines this morning about United having the list that the flight attendant just says, I'm sorry, I need to put you on the list. They don't kick you off, but you're going on the list and there's a good likelihood you're not getting on another United flight for quite a while.
Yeah, that's what we saw. We saw that this morning as an email.
Can I throw out a suggestion for Vicki Lynn? If you go to the western entrance to Yellowstone, which, I mean Yosemite, I'm sorry, to Yosemite, that entrance, you can, not only is it spectacular, but you can drive for miles through the park and you're not getting into the very most crowded areas that from the eastern side you get to that are really crowded. You can drive in there and stop all kinds of places, and I'll bet you could use that. It's a hike, but it's beautiful.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bill.
Rosemary, this is Jen. I was wondering, do we have any, do we have any thoughts of what the travel agencies are doing if we get the so-called dreaded second wave of the virus here?
We're going to keep doing what we've been doing, I guess.
Anything
What
from
do you
the
mean?
industry, in general about, some of these countries or some of the travel or our future plans if things spike up?
We haven't heard anything yet. Things are just starting to open. So, for example, Italy is just now opening and they're limiting what's open, just like we are here. So I think that they're monitoring. And what I have heard is that the whole shutdown was to prevent overrunning the healthcare systems. So I think if we keep it under control and follow the guidelines, maybe if it comes back a second time, maybe we'll be a little bit ahead of it. But I have not seen anything on that yet.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hey, Tom.
Hey.
Rosemary, what is your take on New York City?
I would probably hold off on New York City right now. You've got a lot of people in a very small space, and unless you have to go, I'd probably wait on that one for a little while.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosemary.
Christmas time, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, it's prettiest. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank
We
you all.
hope you'll come see us again soon, sooner than later.
Okay, well, thank you very much.